"Sir, you can't bring that dog through this gate." The words were sharp, cold, like they'd been rehearsed. But the man in the wheelchair didn't flinch. Not yet. The K9 beside him, a massive, battle-worn German shepherd with a faded scar across its left eye, tensed. It didn't growl, it didn't move, but its ears flicked back just slightly, like it sensed something wasn't right. The terminal was busy, too loud. Crying babies, rolling luggage, last calls echoing over loudspeakers. But in Gate 14B, everything stopped. People paused mid-step. A TSA agent reached for his belt, and somewhere in the back a woman whispered, "Wait, that's Ghost, the Iraq dog." The veteran, grey-bearded, eyes shadowed by the weight of wars no one saw, gripped the leash tighter. His hand trembled, not from fear, from something older, deeper, rage maybe, or sorrow that had dried up years ago. "This dog's not just cleared," he said, voice hoarse. "He saved 3 men in Kabul, 2 Marines and me." The supervisor stepped forward, clipboard clutched. Suit too clean for anyone who's seen sand or blood or brotherhood. "I understand, sir, but that animal isn't listed in our database. If he's not cleared under the Department of Defense Transition Program, we're required to detain him for processing. Quarantine protocol. Detain, processing, quarantine." The words didn't hit the man like bullets. They hit like betrayal. He looked down at Ghost. The dog looked back, not blinking, not afraid. Not of these people. But then, Ghost moved, slowly, deliberately, one paw forward, then he sat, directly between the wheelchair and the guard. Someone in the crowd gasped. The young TSA agent's hand flew to his holster. The veteran lifted his palm. Don't even think about it." Silence stretched like a wire pulled tight. Then, "He's not supposed to be alive," someone muttered behind the gate counter. And that's when the air shifted. People turned, eyes narrowed, not at the veteran, not at the dog, but at the voice, a man in uniform. Same rank as the veteran once wore, only his was pressed, spotless. His eyes flicked toward the clipboard, then to the scarred dog. That dog was reported Kia 4 years ago. Now even Ghost tilted his head, the veteran's jaw clenched. His voice, when it came, felt like a storm barely held in check. "Yeah? Funny. So was I." Loop shattered. Everything people thought they knew unraveled. The dog. The man. They weren't supposed to be here. Which raised the real question. If they were both declared dead, then why is someone trying so hard to separate them? Ghost suddenly stood, muscles tight, nose lifted. He sniffed the air once, then turned sharply toward Gate 14's exit and growled, low, warning, protective, not at the staff, but at someone watching from the shadows. 4 years earlier, northern Iraq, he wasn't supposed to come home. Sergeant Daniel Rourke had made peace with that somewhere between the burning oil fields and the broken convoy outside Kirkuk. Men like him didn't get parades. They got black bags, folded flags, and silence. But Ghost was different. He'd been the runt, a German shepherd born half the size of the others, left behind in the kennel nobody checked twice. But war has a strange way of finding strength in the unexpected. Ghost didn't bark when bullets flew. He didn't flinch when mortars hit. He moved like he understood the stakes, like he chose to stand between death and his handler every damn time. And that handler was Daniel. Back then, the two were inseparable. They slept in the same dust, ate the same rations. Ghost had once dragged Daniel 20 feet to cover after an IED blew their Humvee sideways, ribs broken, leg nearly detached, but he held on. And when the dust cleared, it wasn't medics who found them. It was Ghost, limping, muzzle bloodied, dragging Daniel's unconscious body across a stretch of burning asphalt. They told him Ghost was killed in action during the final ambush, but no body was ever recovered. Just ashes, paperwork, silence. Daniel didn't attend a funeral, didn't believe in ghosts, until one showed up. Present day. Veterans Medical Center 2 months ago. Daniel had been living in the hollow shell of his body, paralyzed from the waist down, pushing through rehab with the stubbornness only a war-born man could possess. His family had stopped visiting. The government had given up on breakthroughs, and the only photo by his bedside was of Ghost, taken years ago, blurry, sunlit, full of life. Then, the envelope came. No return address, just coordinates and a date. Inside, a single sentence. The dog they buried wasn't yours. Daniel stared at it for hours, thought it was a prank, a mind game, but something in his gut, a soldier's instinct, told him it was real. He checked the coordinates. A private K9 rehabilitation facility, government contracted, unregistered. And when he got there, he found Ghost, caged, gaunt, covered in surgical scars that didn't belong. But the eyes knew him, even after 4 years, and when the gate opened, the dog didn't hesitate. He crossed the room, sat beside the wheelchair, pressed his head against Daniel's thigh, and never moved again. Now, back at the airport. Daniel looked around at the crowd. He didn't see curious strangers. He saw civilians, unaware, blind to the weight of service, the cost of loyalty, but worse, he saw the uniforms. Officials pretending to protect, while separating a soldier from the only soul who'd actually saved him. And Ghost knew, he felt it, that the enemy wasn't behind a mountain or across a border this time. It was wearing badges, hiding behind policies. Someone had gone through a lot of trouble to erase their existence. Now they were trying to do it again. Mini-twist setup, loop tees. Daniel's fingers slid into the collar Ghost wore, a thick leather strap. Inside it, sewn into the lining, was a microdrive. Not government-issued, not military. It held one thing, a video file, time-stamped, dated, labeled Operation Sandwire, Cover-Up Protocol. It wasn't just about separating a man from his dog. It was about erasing a secret only the dog had survived to remember. Daniel wasn't just fighting to keep his partner, he was fighting to stay alive. Because whatever Ghost had seen, someone was willing to kill to keep it buried. The room with no windows, the door slammed shut behind Daniel. He could hear Ghost pacing, quiet, deliberate. Every few seconds, the dog's breath hitched like it was cataloging the scent of everyone who had been in this secondary screening room before them. A vet, a soldier, and a weaponized secret, now held in a room barely bigger than a janitor's closet. Daniel looked around. One camera, no clock, no visible speaker. They weren't being detained. Not officially. But the door only opened from the outside. He wasn't here by accident, and neither was Ghost. It began as a simple trip, on paper. Daniel had been granted a private audience with a defense contractor rep in D.C. who claimed to have information about Ghost's disappearance, and more importantly, the program Daniel had unknowingly been a part of, Project Echo. The name haunted him, but he couldn't remember why. He had almost turned it down. Until the man said over the phone, "Your K9 didn't just survive, he escaped, and he brought something with him, that was all it took." But from the moment he entered the airport, Daniel could feel the shift. The stairs, the sudden change in boarding protocol, and now this room. The dog paced once more, then stopped, his ears perked, nose twitching. Then, out of nowhere, he sat beside the far wall, head tilted, waiting. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "What are you hearing, boy?" Ghost didn't bark. He stared at the vent, and Daniel felt it again. That soldier's intuition. They weren't just being held, they were being watched and measured, and something was about to happen. Inside a security room humming with screens, a man in civilian clothes leaned forward. His ID badge was blank, no name, just a holographic eagle emblem flickering in the dim light. He tapped his earpiece. "He's got the dog," confirmed, but the subject's wheelchair-bound. "The K9 is the real threat." Another voice, deeper, crackled through. "We need the collar. That drive can't leave the airport. Initiate Phase 2. Tell the guards he's a flagged biological threat." The man didn't blink. He simply turned to the terminal staff watching the screen. "Tag him for enhanced quarantine. Full protocol, no questions." The door finally opened, but not with an apology. 2 men stepped inside, both in TSA uniforms but with black gloves and no name tags. One held a plastic crate, too small for Ghost. The other held a leash. Sir, we'll need to take the animal for scanning. Alone. Daniel's pulse spiked. Ghost. Didn't move, but his tail stiffened. Low growl. Barely audible, but unmistakable. Daniel's voice was a rasp. You try to take that dog from me. One of us isn't walking out of this room. The taller guard stepped forward. You don't have a choice. But just then, Ghost lunged, not at the guards, at the crate. He bit down on the plastic with a snarl so feral the entire thing cracked like glass. He shook it once, then dropped it, sniffed, stared. Daniel's breath caught. There was something inside that crate, not for transport, but for injection. The taller guard cursed, pulling back. This dog's been flagged under Bioasset Alert 6. He may be carrying mutated pathogens. We have orders. Daniel cut him off. Ghost was flagged. Because someone wanted him disappeared. You think I don't know what this is? He pointed to the crate. Splintered plastic. Inside it a sealed case holding a syringe unit, clearly designed for covert sedation. You're not scanning him. You're putting him down. Daniel gripped the edge of his wheelchair. His mind reeled, backward, to the screams, the blinding white of floodlights during that final raid in Iraq, the silence afterward, then Ghost, bloodied, disoriented, pulling something from beneath a bunker wall. A device, a small cylindrical hard drive attached to his collar with surgical precision. Daniel had forgotten, but Ghost hadn't, and that device, still sewn into his collar, held classified footage that would destroy a powerful lie. The guards stepped forward again, but this time Ghost didn't wait. He spun toward Daniel, then barked, loud. Direct once, then ran straight to the door and scratched once, sharply. He wasn't warning anymore. He was trying to lead. Daniel knew that bark.extraction mode. Ghost had just initiated an escape protocol from a building he had never seen before. The dog knew the layout, which meant he'd been here before. Suddenly, the younger of the two, guards hesitated, looked at Ghost, then at Daniel. His fingers trembled. They said the dog was unstable. A failed prototype. Daniel froze. What did you just say? The younger guard backed toward the door. I didn't mean just what they briefed us with, that the dog was part of the Echo series, that he shouldn't have survived. The neural mesh detachment. Daniel's eyes went wide. Ghost stared at the man like he understood. Then everything clicked. Ghost wasn't just a war dog. He was a test subject, part of a neurological trial, something the public never knew about. A classified project that connected soldiers and dogs through shared cognition, direct neural bonding. And Daniel hadn't just trained with Ghost. He'd shared thoughts with him, brief flashes, emotional transference. The attack that killed Ghost? It wasn't an ambush, it was a purge. Suddenly, alarms blared outside the room. The intercom buzzed with a robotic voice. Security breach. Terminal lockdown initiated. Please remain in place. The hallway went dark, and Ghost, without hesitation, ran to Daniel's side, braced his body, and waited. They were about to run, and whatever was behind that lockdown wasn't meant to keep them in. It was meant to keep someone else out. The building plunged into chaos. Red lights flashed. Shutters slammed down over exit doors. Somewhere in the terminal, people screamed, but the real noise was underground, where the quiet wars were fought. Daniel's fingers gripped the wheels of his chair, knuckles pale. Ghost was already moving, head low, flanking the corridor like it was a battlefield. Not a pet. Not even a K9, a soldier. Something deeper. Unlock's Ghost wasn't navigating randomly. At every intersection he paused, nose twitching, ears scanning, like a living radar locked onto an invisible map. Daniel remembered something from years ago. A training op that ended too clean. They'd been inside a compound supposedly hostile, but Ghost had led them out, without a single command. Ghost, he whispered. How long have they been using you? No answer, of course. But then the dog stopped. A vent. Open. Ghost nudged it, then barked once. Loud. Directive. Daniel understood. They were going through it. With a grunt, he pulled himself out of the chair, dragging his body with his arms. Ghost ducked into the space first, checking. For traps. Then he waited. Daniel followed, pulling himself into the ductwork like a man escaping from hell. As Daniel crawled, his mind blurred back to the moment before the explosion, the one he'd repressed for years. It hadn't been a raid. It had been a test. Ghost had been pulled away from him for upgrades, a new neuro-linked collar, supposedly improving reaction speed. But it wasn't just reaction time they were after. They were testing command override, trying to make Ghost obey signals outside. Of his handler, and Ghost had refused. Daniel remembered now. The techs had been furious. Ghost was supposed to become a prototype for remote warfare, a dog who could be controlled like a drone. Instead, he'd rebelled, which is why they tried to kill them both. But Ghost had survived, and somehow he'd escaped with the data still attached to his body. They dropped out of the vent into a maintenance corridor. Fluorescent lights buzzed above. The terminal was behind them, but not far. Daniel dragged himself into his chair. Ghost barked again, this time shorter, urgent, and then footsteps, coming fast, but not guards. Not TSA military boots. A new threat enters. Black Site agents, 2 men in desert tan combat gear rounded the corner. No patches, no ranks. Black rifles, matte scopes. Ghost didn't growl. He stood still, ears straight. Recognition. Daniel narrowed his eyes. He knows them. But Ghost didn't move to attack. He didn't move at all. One of the men spoke. "Sergeant Rourke, stand down." Daniel's voice shook with disbelief. "You're not TSA. Who are you with?" The man's reply was cold. "We're not here for you. We're here for the dog." They tried to re-trigger Ghost's neural control of them, lifted a black box from his vest. A small device, flat, fingerprint scanned. It pulsed blue. Ghost, suddenly, twitched. His head jerked, his legs went stiff. "No," Daniel rasped. "Don't do this, he's not a machine." But Ghost's body moved without meaning, turned slowly toward Daniel. Eyes blank. For the first time, Daniel saw something worse. Then rage in the dog's face. Emptiness. "Override neural bridge," the soldier said. "Subject E7 is malfunctioning. Wipe emotional recognition. Reset to mission parameters." But before he could finish, Ghost snapped. A flash of memory. The training field. The first game of fetch. The day Daniel bled in the sand. And Ghost curled around his body to keep him warm. It all flooded back at once. The link wasn't broken, it had evolved. Beyond their control. Beyond programming. Ghost lunged, not at Daniel, but at the black box. He shattered it. The man screamed, and Daniel moved. Grabbing the rifle the agent dropped, he aimed. Not to kill, but to slow them down. 1 shot, 2. The men ducked, retreated, yelling into comms. "Echo unit compromised. Subject has breached cognitive parameters." Ghost stood panting, staring at Daniel, and this time, Daniel heard him. Not in words, not telepathy, but emotion. Raw, unfiltered, the kind that burns straight through scars. "We're not done yet." Daniel reached under Ghost's collar. Fingers trembling, he found the lining, pulled it apart. Inside, still warm from years of hidden survival, was the microdrive. He plugged it into the hacked tablet he kept in his backpack. And what he saw, it wasn't just military footage. It was a live feed, a stream, still uploading. Ghost hadn't just escaped with a secret. He'd been broadcasting it the whole time, dozens of files. Footage from inside experimental cages, dogs caged, shocked, brain implants flashing, handlers screaming, and Ghost in the last clip he was biting through steel to get to another dog, another. Test subject, a pup. Whimpering, barely old enough to stand. Ghost didn't run from the system. He fought to save the others. Daniel stared at the footage, heart pounding. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a revelation, a whistleblower, wrapped in fur and loyalty, and now everyone in that airport was at risk, because the agency that created Ghost wasn't going to let this story go public, and they weren't just after 1 man and a dog anymore. They were sending in the cleanup team. Ghost nudged Daniel's knee once, then turned sharply, ears lifted. More boots, but not soldiers this time. A handler, older, limping, holding a photograph of Ghost. He stepped forward, face pale, voice shaking. "You don't understand. That dog doesn't just remember. He remembers everything." For the first time in hours, Daniel felt the static inside his chest ease. They were in the parking structure now, 4 levels down. Above them, the chaos in the terminal sounded muffled, like a war zone remembered through glass. Sirens, footsteps, yelling. But distant, the old handler who had appeared, Commander Jet, had led them here through a forgotten emergency access path. "He was mine before he was yours," Jet said quietly as he moved slowly, his cane tapping concrete. "Ghost, he remembers pain you've never even seen." Daniel didn't respond. Not yet. Ghost walked between them, strangely calm, alert but no longer tense. As if he knew something had finally clicked into place, they reached a hidden SUV, matte black, unmarked, parked behind a dumpster lined with radiation warning signs. No one came here. No one was supposed to. Jet tapped a panel on the side of the vehicle. It opened with a hiss. Inside, reinforced seats, Faraday cage lining, tech Daniel couldn't name. "This car's invisible to satellites," Jet muttered. "We've got one shot. Get in." Daniel hesitated, looking down at Ghost. The dog stared back, then gently nudged his side. They got in. The vehicle pulled away into the underground exit tunnel. Daniel finally allowed himself to lean back. His shoulder throbbed from crawling. His hands were scraped, but for the first time he felt safe. Jet passed him a small canteen. "What you saw on that drive, it wasn't everything. It's just the surface." Daniel drank. Jet continued. "Ghost was part of something larger. Program? They didn't just try to train him to obey them. They tried to erase his ability to love." Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "But they failed." Jet looked down, his hands shaking. "Yeah, they failed." Ghost leaned his head on Daniel's knee. For a moment, the world felt quiet. For a moment, Daniel let himself believe this was over. A soft chime pinged from the dashboard. Jet frowned. He tapped the screen, lines of code began scrolling. "Unauthorized access attempt." "No," Jet muttered. "This channel's encrypted." Another ping. Then a robotic voice. "Vehicle compromised. Neural unit detected. Location broadcasting." Daniel's heart plummeted. Ghost stood up suddenly, eyes wide. The lights inside the SUV flickered once, then died. Jet turned, panic in his face. "They embedded a live tracker inside Ghost's skull. I told them it was inhumane. They said it was fail-safe." Ghost began to tremble, not from fear, from something deeper. His front leg twitched. His breathing grew ragged. He began to pace erratically. "They're trying to override his nervous system," Jet whispered. "They're trying to kill him remotely." Daniel shouted, "Then shut it off." "I can't. Not in here." The vehicle's interior lit up red. A voice began counting down from 30. Neural breach, reset in 30 seconds. Daniel's mind raced. They hadn't just tracked them. They were going to wipe Ghost's mind, permanently. 25 seconds. Ghost was spinning now, barking uncontrollably. Foam at his lips, Daniel crawled forward, grabbed the back of his neck, looked straight into his fading eyes. "Ghost, listen to me. You've done enough. I'm proud of you. Just hold on." The barking stopped. Ghost froze. For 2 seconds. He was back then, 20 seconds left. Jet ripped open the floor panel, revealing a burn-proof case. Inside, a small surgical scalpel and a blinking EMP injector. Daniel stared. "No time," Jet growled. "If we use the EMP, we can stop the signal, but it'll burn out everything. His memories, his instincts, maybe even his heartbeat." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Ghost whined, once, torn between survival and erasure. 10 seconds, Jet shouted, "Do it, Daniel, or we lose him." Daniel raised the EMP injector. Ghost looked up at him, calm, resigned, and for just a second, he wagged his tail. The EMP burst didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like nothing, no boom, no crack. Just the heavy hum of every electrical nerve in the world dying at once. Daniel didn't breathe, couldn't. He cradled Ghost in his arms, the dog's head slack against his chest. No whine, no blink, no warmth. "Ghost." No answer. He dropped. The injector. Fell to his knees. Blood from a cut on his forehead smeared across Ghost's fur. Everything was still. No beeping. No countdown. No pursuit. Just the smell of ozone and burning wires. Jet stood frozen by the dashboard, staring at the cracked EMP unit in Daniel's hand. "You killed him," he whispered. Daniel didn't look up. He couldn't. His hands were still on Ghost's ribs, desperately waiting for a rise, a twitch, something. "He trusted me." The words fell like ashes from Daniel's lips. He remembered the first time they met. Ghost had been just 2 years old, fresh out of K9 training, wary of every handler before him. But not Daniel. With Daniel, he'd laid down on the first day. Rolled over, surrendered, and now he was cold. Still gone. They'd been trapped in a ravine after an ambush. 2 days with no reinforcements. Rain pouring. The radio dead. Daniel had taken shrapnel to the leg. Infection setting in. Fever high. He remembered Ghost dragging pieces of his torn jacket to him, trying to keep him warm. The dog had laid across Daniel's chest all night, keeping his body heat pressed to the soldier's failing heart. The medics found them on day 3, but Ghost had found him first. That's the moment Daniel stopped seeing him as a military asset and started calling him son. Jet placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. His face was pale with grief too, but different. Detached. "You did what had to be done. He chose this." Daniel swatted the hand away. "No. You don't get to say that." Jet backed off. Daniel wrapped his arms around Ghost's limp body, burying his face into the fur that still smelled faintly of pine and gunpowder. "You were the only one left," he whispered. "Everyone else forgot me. The VA, the commanders, hell, even my family." He choked on the next words. "You remembered." Tears streamed down his cheeks, and then he screamed, a broken, feral sound that tore through the SUV like a siren. Scream that held years of loss, of war, of watching friends die, of sitting in a wheelchair, staring at a medal that meant nothing. A scream only Ghost had ever understood. And now, he was gone. Daniel laid Ghost down gently, then wheeled himself to the far side of the SUV and stared out the broken window into the abandoned tunnel. His hand hovered over his sidearm, the same weapon he'd carried through Fallujah, Kandahar, and the endless blank months of civilian life afterward. It felt heavy. He stared at it for too long, then he cocked it. Jet turned. "Daniel, don't!" Daniel didn't blink. A breath, just the faintest one, but Daniel heard it. The pistol slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. He turned back. Ghost's paw twitched, once, then again. The dog's ribs lifted, just a fraction of an inch. Daniel rushed forward. Ghost opened his eyes. Just barely, a flicker of amber. He was still in there, weak, scarred, maybe even broken, but alive. Jet knelt beside them. "I thought the EMP would fry him completely." Daniel didn't answer. He pressed his forehead against Ghost's. "No," he whispered. He didn't survive because of the program. He survived in spite of it. The SUV's cabin was still dark, still quiet. But something had changed. Ghost was alive. Not whole, but present. His amber eyes met Daniel's with flickers of the bond they'd always had. Then Jet began to talk, not like a man explaining, but like one confessing, like a man too old and too tired to keep secrets anymore. "You think this was about a flight delay? About a service dog flagged in a system?" Daniel shook his head. "I know better." Jet sat down across from them. His cane fell to the floor. And then the truth began to unravel. Project E, Jet said, was never officially acknowledged. Not even among Black Ops. It began with behavioral augmentation, mostly in dogs, smart breeds, shepherds, labs, but it quickly became darker. Daniel leaned in, watching Ghost slowly lift his head. They weren't just teaching dogs to obey under stress, they were teaching them to override their instincts, to turn off pain responses, empathy. He took a breath. To betray the ones they loved, if given the order. Daniel's stomach twisted. That's what Ghost was trained for? No, Jet said. That's what he resisted. That's why they called him a failure. Jet reached into his coat, pulled out something small, cold, rectangular, a drive. He held it out, This has everything: footage, emails, medical reports, what they implanted, what they triggered today. Daniel took it. His hand trembled. "They'll hunt you for it," Jet said. "They're already hunting me. That's why they tried to intercept Ghost. He's the last living proof of what they did." Daniel looked down at Ghost again, his body weak but breathing deeper now, and that's when it clicked. The airport search, the random override signal. The strange officers who knew Ghost's name before he gave it, they weren't there to protect anyone. They were there to erase him. Daniel's mind raced back to the airport, the moment Ghost froze in the terminal, eyes wide, sniffing the air. Recognizing something no one else could. He wasn't afraid, Daniel whispered. He wasn't confused. "No," Jet confirmed grimly. He was resisting the signal, fighting the override. Daniel's throat tightened. What would have happened if he hadn't? Jet didn't answer right away. Then finally, quietly, he would have turned. On you. On civilians. Anyone nearby. Daniel closed his eyes. Not in denial, but in rage. Cold, soul-crushing rage. They tried to make him a weapon. Daniel pressed his forehead against the SUV wall. The silence buzzed. He remembered another day, years back. An alley in Mosul. They were ambushed. One of their own panicked, screamed out. Ghost moved first, pulled that soldier out of the kill zone, dragged him behind a truck, took a bullet to the side doing it. He never whimpered. He saved that man's life. That man later wrote a letter to command. "This dog understands loyalty better than I do." And now Daniel realized they would have erased that memory if they could. Daniel looked at the drive, then back at Ghost, then at Jet. They buried this for a reason. If it gets out, they'll do everything to stop you, Jet said. They'll call you unstable, a disabled vet with PTSD and delusions. You'll lose whatever's left of your name. Daniel didn't hesitate. "I already lost everything." He gently laid a hand over Ghost's chest, but he didn't. "And I'll make sure the world knows," Jet nodded slowly. "There's a man, Colonel Maris, deep intel. He still has a conscience. He's buried himself in a private, secure compound outside Barstow. We get this drive to him, it's over." Daniel stared. Barstow was 300 miles away, through checkpoints, cameras, roads monitored by the same people trying to kill them, and he was in a wheelchair. With a weakened dog, no safe ID, no friends left in the system. It was impossible. Daniel leaned forward. "Then we don't take the roads." Jet grinned faintly. "There's a military freight line, decommissioned after '09. Runs west. No. Oversight. We get to the junction in the next 4 hours, we can disappear." Daniel checked Ghost's pulse again. Stronger now. He reached into his pack, pulled out the last of the glucose shots and injected it into Ghost's thigh. "You with me, buddy?" Ghost blinked slowly, then tried to sit up. The fire was still there. Back above ground, red lights were spreading across the airport grid. Tactical units, drones, faceless men in black coats whispering into radios. EMP signature located. Target may still be mobile. All exits, code white. But Daniel and Jet were already 2 miles away, hidden in a rusted delivery. Truck used once for army rations. Ghost lay in the back, covered in thermal-blocking blankets. Daniel sat beside him, hand always on his fur, and that drive, pressed into a hollow, carved into his chair. As the truck rattled along forgotten roads, Jet spoke again. "I trained with him once, before he was assigned to you." Daniel looked over. "Ghost?" Jet nodded. "I was the first one to give him the kill command. During testing, he didn't do it. Froze. Looked at me like I'd betrayed him." He paused, jaw tightening. "I was proud of him for failing, but I didn't say anything. And they almost retired him, terminated him until you stepped in." Daniel's grip tightened on Ghost's shoulder. "They didn't deserve him," he said. "No," Jet agreed. "But you did." As the sun began to rise over the Mojave horizon, they saw the train station in the distance. It looked abandoned, but movement near the fence told them they weren't alone. 2 black SUVs, drones circling above. Daniel's heart dropped. "They beat us here," but Jet didn't flinch. "Then we don't walk in." They parked the truck half a mile back, dug into the gravel, along an old rail spur. Jet handed Daniel a switch. "Push this. The truck will explode. Every sensor in 5 miles. We'll reroute." Daniel looked at him. "And us?" "We go under. A maintenance tunnel. Barely wide enough for the wheelchair." They moved. Fast. Smoke rose behind them as the truck detonated. Sirens wailed, but Daniel didn't look back. Ghost pressed forward. Even limping, he led the way. They emerged under the tracks. Sunlight slicing across the desert. A train was coming, slow and heavy. The engineer was one of Jet's old contacts. Blind in one eye, paranoid, loyal. Daniel lifted Ghost into the train first, then hauled himself up. Jet climbed in last. Barely. As the train began to pull away, Daniel turned one last time toward the horizon. Helicopters circled. A sniper scanned. The wreckage behind them. Too late. They were gone. Inside the train, Daniel opened the drive, plugged it into a shielded laptop. Footage began to load. One video stood out. A sterile lab. Ghost strapped to a table. A voice off screen. "He won't respond. He's too bonded to the subject." Another voice. "Then kill the subject. Let's see what happens." The screen showed Daniel's name on a folder. Date. 6 months ago. Daniel's blood ran cold. They planned to kill me, just to break him. Ghost looked up at him. No fear. Just steady eyes, like he'd known all along. The train rumbled across endless desert. Ghost lay with his head in Daniel's lap, his breathing steady, eyes half closed as if the weight of everything they'd endured had finally caught up. Daniel stared at the footage replaying on the cracked laptop screen. The date, the voices, his name. They had planned to kill him long before Ghost disappeared, not because he was expendable, because he wasn't. He was the only thing stopping Ghost from becoming what they wanted, a mindless weapon with no attachments. The bond that saved both their lives had been the one thing the program couldn't control. Daniel clicked on a final encrypted file at the bottom of the drive. "If you're seeing this, the program has failed. The subject, Ghost, has resisted neural reprogramming and maintained handler loyalty. Termination orders have been issued to eliminate emotional interference. Handler must be neutralized. Data. Destruction protocol to follow." His stomach tightened. They never expected him to survive, never expected Ghost to fight back. And yet, here they were, alive, together, holding the truth in their hands. Daniel closed the laptop. Looked out at the barren landscape rushing past. "Looks like we were never meant to make it out alive," he muttered, his voice rough but steady. Ghost shifted, nudging Daniel's hand with his nose, an unspoken reminder that despite everything, they did. But before Daniel could let himself breathe, a faint buzz rattled from Jet's radio. A garbled transmission. "Target reacquired. Inbound at checkpoint west of Barstow. Orders unchanged. Handler extraction unnecessary. K9 retrieval. Priority 1. Jet's face darkened. "They're not giving up," he said quietly. "They know where we're going." Daniel stared at the horizon. The safe haven that wasn't safe anymore. A single light flickered at the far end of the train car. A shadow moved. Daniel's breath caught. Someone else was on board. Ghost's ears perked, low growl rumbling deep in his throat, and then a familiar voice echoed from the darkness. "You didn't think you were the only survivor, huh, did you?" A figure stepped into the light. Another K9 scarred, eyes haunted. And beside it, a woman in military fatigues Daniel thought had died years ago. Daniel's heart stopped. The woman standing in the flickering train light wasn't a stranger. Captain Elise Monroe, once his commanding officer, once presumed dead. She walked forward slowly, her left arm in a sling, right hand resting gently on the back of the other K9. "His name's Vex," she said quietly. And like Ghost, they tried to turn him. Daniel couldn't speak, his throat clenched. She was supposed to have died in the Kandahar blast. There had been a memorial, a folded flag. "I went underground after the program turned on me," Elise said. "Faked the records. I've been tracing every surviving dog they didn't retire." Her eyes met Ghost's. "And he's the key, isn't he?" Daniel nodded slowly. "More than that," he said. "He's the last proof that these dogs still have their souls." Elise led them off the train under the cover of nightfall. Barstow's outskirts shimmered with heat mirages even after dark. But deeper in the desert, hidden between old mining tunnels and decommissioned bunkers, the truth came into view. A sanctuary, underground, shielded, cooled by the earth. No cameras, no wires, no cell towers, just a place one to exist, to heal. Inside, Daniel found walls lined with files, photos of dogs, names, some with red slashes through them. "Those are the ones we lost," Elise said. "Some to the program. Some we had to put down ourselves." Daniel stood in silence, then looked at Ghost. "You're not just the last of your kind," he whispered. "You're the first of something better." It was time Daniel uploaded the data. Video after video, footage of unethical trials, commands ignored, handlers punished for dogs showing loyalty, names, faces, documents that were never supposed to be seen again. They didn't send it to the press, they sent it straight to every military watchdog group, Congressional Oversight Office, and anonymous truth network on the planet. They didn't ask for justice, they demanded it. Within 72 hours, the story went nuclear. Veterans across the country came forward. Former handlers, trainers, scientists, even one ex-lieutenant who admitted to burying early evidence of the experiments. Congress issued emergency hearings. The Pentagon released a carefully worded statement. Then came the footage. A whistleblower. From inside the lab uploaded hours of internal video. Ghost's image, strapped to a table, resisting every inhuman order, went viral. But it wasn't his resistance that brought the world to tears. It was what happened after. A single piece of footage played on every news network. Daniel, bloodied, barely conscious in a hospital bed. Ghost, refusing to leave his side. Nurses trying to pull him away, and Ghost collapsing beside him, whining, pressing his head into Daniel's chest. "This dog," a voice said off-screen, "has chosen his loyalty." No matter the cost, it became a symbol, a movement, an awakening. Weeks later, Daniel sat in the sanctuary's main hallway, watching as more veterans arrived, some in wheelchairs, some carrying urns of their former partners, some with dogs still. Alive but broken, they came to heal, to learn what really happened. And in some cases, to rebuild. Elise walked beside him, reading through new requests. "We've got 6 dogs in Georgia flagged for behavioral shutdown. You up for another trip?" Daniel smiled faintly. "If Ghost is." He turned. Ghost stood, nearby, scarred, limping, and proud. His tail gave a single slow wag. Later that night, Daniel sat alone with Ghost under the stars. He spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "You saved me more times than I can count. Even when I didn't know you, we're fighting them." He reached out, touching the dog's head gently. "I couldn't save everyone, but we saved the truth. That has to be enough." Ghost let out a slow, contented breath. Daniel closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he felt free. Months passed. The world moved forward, but not untouched. A federal commission ruled the Project E program unethical and irreversible. The surviving dogs were turned over to chosen handlers for permanent care. New canine ethics regulations were passed, and at the center of it all, Ghost's photo hung in the Hall of Honor in D.C. Below it, a plaque. He disobeyed for the right. Reasons: he resisted not because he was broken, but because he was whole. 1 year later to the day, Daniel and Ghost returned to the terminal where it all began. Same spot, same time, no uniform, just a man and his dog. A little girl walked up with her mother, pointing. "That's him, that's the hero dog." Daniel chuckled. Ghost leaned in, letting the girl pet his nose gently. Then, just as they turned to leave, an overhead voice called out, "Mr. Ashford, Gate C7 is now boarding. Military escort confirmed." Daniel froze. He hadn't booked any flights. Ghost tilted his head. A figure appeared in the distance, Elise, waving them forward. In her hand, 2 tickets. Destination, no return address. Daniel turned to Ghost. "You ready for one more?" Ghost gave a soft bark.